You're listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the stewardship and conservation of grasslands, diverse ecological landscapes, and the salt of the earth individuals who dedicate their lives to this endeavor. And now here's your host, Haley Shipp.
Welcome back to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, where we talk about the people, partnerships, and the practices that are shaping the future of ranching. I am your host, Haley Shipp, and today's guest is not only an incredibly talented voice in agriculture, you can hear her on the Western Ag Network. Rachel Gabel is the kind of person who makes you want to pour a second cup of coffee, maybe a third glass of wine, and settle in for hours of good conversation. Just soak in her stories and insight. She is the assistant editor of the Fence Post magazine, a longtime ag journalist, a mom, a wife, a rancher, and as of now, the author of 8 books, with number 9 on the way. Now, I invited Rachel on today because her writing, it isn't just a passion. It's become an added enterprise for her family's ranching operation. We all know the old saying, behind every successful rancher is a wife who works in town. But nowadays, with a bit of technology, flexibility, and creativity, that job in town might be something you build from the kitchen table or from the passenger seat of a pickup. And let's call a spade a spade. It's not just the wife's duty anymore. Anybody can add an enterprise. Now, I know that a lot of you listening might have had that little thought before, maybe while you're fixing fence or hauling some hay. I could write a book. And the truth is, you probably could. You've lived it. You've seen things. You've got stories to tell. So today, not only are we going to talk about how Rachel has made writing into an added enterprise, but you might just walk away with a few ideas or even a little push to start telling your own story, too. So with that, I am happy to introduce today's guest on the Ranch Stewards Podcast, Mrs. Rachel Gabel.
Well, sure. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Haley. I was excited, and I remember encouraging you to get this podcast off the ground before you did. So I'm excited that you're chugging right along and doing good work. I live in northeastern Colorado on a multi-generational cow-calf operation. We do some custom farming. I did not grow up in the cattle business. I grew up in the oil and gas business in a rural part of the state. And I'm the assistant editor of the Fence Post magazine, and I wrote, 4-H club news, and my local paper published it when I was, 12, and they still had film cameras around their neck and Virginia Slims hanging out of their mouths at the newspaper office. And they suggested that I send my something like livestock judging results or something to the Fence Post. And I did, and they published it. And so I thought I was famous. And that was in like 1989. And I'm still there. I've taken a couple of detours, but I've been full-time at the Fence Post since 2018. I used to have a job in town. I taught secondary English for about 15 years and did that until my youngest was born, and I was able to stay home full-time and help on the operation and write. So I'm on... I write for the Fence Post and then a farm broadcaster for Western Ag Network. And I'm also a weekly rural issues and agriculture columnist for a couple of major Denver papers, the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes and Colorado Politics. And then I have books. And I've had the opportunity to write a couple of them for Colorado Agriculture in the Classroom and then just some personal projects as well. So it sounds like I have a lot going on, but it seems to all get done.
Well, and it's all very complementary of one another. And I think that that's for folks that do have a lot of irons in the fire, as long as you can make sure that they can stay in a similar fire, it's easier
Exactly.
to create a lot of things.
The same kind of flammable is what I need. And I've managed to find jobs that have minimal math necessary. So it's really a win-win deal for me.
Well, Rachel, we could talk for days about the different jobs that you have and the different things that you do. And again, I just want to emphasize that with this technology and with the ability to have proved yourself to different editors and different publications in the past, you can show them that this work is getting done regardless of whether you might have just gone outside and fed calves and ran back in the house to do it, or if you're sitting in that office with that Virginia Slim unlit now, since we no longer allow smoking in the buildings, but it can get done in any capacity. So I think that that's so cool about what we're able to do in the media world, which I still dabble in, of course. And for folks that have podcasts, they do as well. Rachel, you do have a podcast. We'll make sure to bring that around here before the end of this discussion. So don't let me forget that if I do. But what I brought you on our podcast for today was to talk more about this actually having a book product published author. And you do have a series of books. As I'm looking through it, you have some that are geared towards the youth. You've got some that are more of like a coffee table, kind of a fun publication, and then some that do sort of a credence to agriculture and or a credence to history. And so those three different genres are unique to each other. How did you get into all of those? What was your first book that kind of made you take off?
Sure. Oh, my first book is called Kindergarten Rancher. And when my little girl was littler, she's taller than me now, but when she was little, she didn't really want to go to school, to kindergarten. She wanted to stay home and work cows and do rancher stuff. And, they weren't teaching her anything in kindergarten that she was going to need to be a rancher anyway. So she thought she'd just stay home and drive four-wheelers and stuff. So I took that story and realized that there was a lack of accurate ag stories that showed little girls like that and little boys like that who are in rural areas and whose mom and dad don't have the more common jobs that are actually on the ranch. And so I wrote that, and we so that was the first one. And then on the second, I called Jennifer Sharpie at Colorado Foundation for Agriculture. And I said, so I have this idea that kind of dabbles on Colorado agriculture. In Colorado, it's very diverse. You need a passport to go to the different corners of the state. And agriculture is very, very diverse here, from sheep up in the northwest corner to melons in the southeast corner. Very different as you go around the state. And I thought, boy, if we could just show all of these different kind of commodities and different farms and ranches and operations and how they may have changed quite a bit, like for dairies, for instance, they look a lot different than they did in Grandpa's day, but they're still good. And so Still Good, my second book, came out of that. And, there was a lack of those little kids that are from ag being able to see themselves in books. And there was a shortage of accurate ag books that you were actually willing to read to your children at night. Like, there's some good accurate ones that read a lot like a textbook. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I have some of those too. And then there were, bulls walking around with udders on their back legs. Walking around on their back legs with udders. Back legs. So I was trying to kind of hit the middle there and do both of those. And so several books later, that's where they are. You mentioned the kind of coffee table books. So I have the cow bios that I post on social media, and those came out of a 3 a.m. I was sitting out in the goat barn waiting on a goat to kid, and there was a goat with an underbite, and she kept looking around the gate at me, and she looked pretty glamorous for a goat. And I took a picture of her on my iPhone with like the portrait setting. So the back was kind of gauzy, and she was up on the gate with her underbite, and she looked just, magnificent. So I named her Linda and said that she was a divorcee and a good bowler. And she makes a mean pina colada and a chocolate lasagna, and believes that the man of her dreams would come into her life in a less than practical car and custom bowling shoes. And I was just being a smart aleck, but I posted it with the picture of the gauzy background goat with the underbite. And that was the beginning of cow bios. And I've posted one every Monday through Friday since then. And that has turned into 2 books of cow bios. So I don't know that that's a social media plan. Like, I'm going to make fun of middle-aged rural women and post them with pictures of goats and cows, and I'm going to bring together women from across the country. But that is totally what happened.
I think we strangely all see a little bit of ourselves. If it's not in Linda, it's in one of your different bios that's out there.
Yeah, you are Linda or you know Linda.
Exactly. And just the pictures of ag, I've been doing a lot of thinking on just the photography that can go into agriculture and how it is a treat for us in ag, because it's like you said, with writing the children's book, so that it's something that your kids could kind of see themselves in, or another farm or ranch kid could see themselves in. But just the photography, when you can kind of relate to it, it just, you're scrolling through a social media feed and you see so many cute outfits and you see so many diet plans and you see so many whatever else's. And then now it's like, oh, there's a goat, there's a cow. That feels like home, and it makes things more relatable. So I love that. So you've turned that into those more coffee table type books with the cow bios. I'm curious what your response has been to all of these. I know the cow bios being on social media really takes off, as all things in social media do, but what has the response been in general to these different books that you've published? And I guess, too, how long have you been at it? How long ago did Kindergarten Rancher come out?
That one was published in 2020, and I have 8 now in print total. And it's it's been interesting. You know, the ones that were written specifically for ag in the classroom were really written to serve that purpose and to boil down some big topics like grazing on federal lands and predator depredation and the Greek history of sheep herders in northwest Colorado. And I tried to boil that all down to a book that kindergartners through 6th graders could listen to, which is, I sometimes I need reined in, but no one has done that yet, so I just keep rolling. But those really serve their purpose, and I think it's important, especially as Colorado and the West become what they're becoming, that we keep a clear eye on what the past is in agriculture, and that with any of these efficiencies that we have and any of this ability to feed and fuel and clothe so many people, it started with these guys whose this entire industry was built on their shoulders. This most recent book is called Cattle, Corn, and Courage, the story of Dr. John Matsushima. And he's 104, and he met me at Prairie School like a week ago and spoke to the entire high school and then the entire elementary at 104. And there were high school kids that were asking him, what's your advice for people that want to go into agriculture? And how many times do you get to, as a high schooler, get to talk to a 104-year-old legend in the industry that you're interested in and ask them their advice? So if there's any such thing as a keeper of the flame for the stories and the history of ag, then I think that's the role that a lot of my books play.
Rachel, can you explain? You touched on it earlier some, but I think a lot of folks in the West, even though we are in rural areas, we all think, gosh, I wish our schools had a little bit more agriculture education in them. And especially as schools, hit so many funding struggles, some of those positions are the ones that get hit and get on the chopping block, because we can't all avoid math as long as Rachel Gabel has. So we have to keep those, of course, the very core classes, and then sometimes these ag classes do get cut. And so having the opportunity to bring agriculture into the classroom through a publication like this is incredible. How were you able to, you mentioned making some phone calls and getting connected to the right people, but how did that process go for you to really make sure that it met their curriculum, that you were doing right by the school system, and that you were invited to come in and to have this opportunity for them to teach their classrooms through this?
Sure. Well, I'll use the most recent book as an example. And all of those conversations started with, hey, I've got an idea for a story. And these were all stories that I've wanted to tell for a while, especially the Matsushima story. So we thought about what the crux of the story is and then just kind of worked backwards. And the folks at Colorado Foundation for Ag and the greater Ag in the Classroom project, even nationally, has a ton of free resources, and the different states choose different projects every year. And I've been lucky enough that I think I've had 4 of my books used in Colorado, but it's all part of a giant package of curriculum that is standards aligned for that state, which is amazing to me. There's pre-planned lessons. So there's like, if you have an extra 5 minutes, here's a little bit of ag that you can sneak in and a little bit of history. Or if you have a whole day of STEM things planned, here's a giant project that you can do with your kids. Kindergarten, no problem. 6th grade, you bet. And those are all there. They're all free. And then even if you just want to do an hour, then you can have a volunteer reader or someone that you know can come into the classroom and read the book, talk about it, answer questions from their own personal experiences. And with the Cattle, Corn, and Courage, they were able to read the book, see the pictures, try a beef stick that was made by Ram Country Meats at Colorado State University from, Colorado beef. And they were able to see a bag of number 2 corn and a bag of steam flaked corn from Keith Bath, my neighbor. We feed his steam flaked corn every day. And, they're able to see and smell and taste all of those things and hear the story and see the historical photos, which I would be remiss if I did not say that my illustrator is Liz Bandman Munster Tiger. And she made these historically accurate down to the spoon in the oatmeal. They're incredible and they're beautiful, and it adds so much to the story. But the story is able to encompass so many different things, and there's so many moving pieces that it's just like an a la carte for teachers. They can take whatever they want and they can make a lesson as big or small as they want. And the thing that I've seen with it is I've spoken to some really rural schools like Prairie, and those kids weren't all from an ag background by any stretch of the imagination. There were some from big multi-generational ag backgrounds, and there were some kids who don't have any connection to agriculture. So I think no matter how rural or urban the school is, there's an opportunity and a need for that, because even the kids that come from those backgrounds, like my kids, don't know anything about produce or hogs or anything like that. They know what they know, and so it's good for them to see something other than what they're familiar with.
Yeah. We actually are in the middle of helping to prepare for a ranch boot camp class. It's a 4-day class that's going to be happening in Winnett, Montana here during May. And it is teaching the basic ranch lessons, like how to make sure a fence is tight, how to make sure a gate is latched, down to behavior in a branding corral, and just the different things that you do and don't bring up if you're talking to a rancher, that you don't ask how many cattle they own or how many acres they own. And we're hoping that class can be something for high school to college students to even young adults that are maybe getting into the wildlife type of an industry, that are going to be in that same room with ranchers and needing to know those things. And in a way, hoping that some of the ranch kids maybe can get some more insight as to how other people do things, not just how our family did them, but maybe here's a different strategy to do it. So I think anytime you can do ag education, whether it's for a ranch kid, for a town kid, whoever it is, the industry as a whole is going to benefit from it. So I love that. We're talking about how to, how your books specifically have had an impact, but now I'm going to kind of bring this back over. Maybe we've got somebody listening that is saying, I have been dying to write a ranch romance novel, or I have been, for our listeners, Rachel just had an expression, but they've got an idea. Maybe it's, there's a lot of folks that want to do histories, a ranch history of a region, or maybe go full on fiction, or do something children's book where they need to come up with an illustrator. How do you find those support people to help you put a book together? Because you can have a beautiful story and beautiful words, but that is not the only thing that is comprising a book. So, what other experts, what other folks do you need to call on when you go into this production?
Sure. Well, I'm lucky because I work in print media. So I'm surrounded by these people who have these amazing mad design skills and illustration skills and audio skills. So I'm pretty spoiled there. But my first illustrator was Shannon Clark, and she's a ranch gal. She's from Wyoming. She lives over in Colburn, Colorado now. And I found her because she had posted some of her a pencil drawing of two bulls, head to head. I think a Charolais and a Hereford, and I thought, oh man, she can draw and she knows ranches, she knows cattle, and I connected with her, and it was through that we were able to. Truly, we muddled our way through that first one. We learned a lot. It's a pretty steep learning curve. But I think if you find someone who has some expertise, whether that's drawing or photography or whatever it is that you're looking for, and they have the either ability to understand what you're writing about or the desire to understand and to learn about it, then that's certainly somebody that you can work with. I mean, there's lots of people that have produced books, and I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to them. I have folks reach out to me periodically with just a quick question, and I don't mind that. I think that one of the lists, I have a lot of lists. One of the podcasts that I'd like to do is one with Liz and kind of talk about the process. And I can't even speak to her process because it's voodoo and magic and unicorns, and I don't understand how she does what she does. It's so beautiful. But a lot of it is research and just having all of those things together and having a good outline of what you want so that you can be clear with somebody when you find that illustrator, for example, that you can say, okay, this is what I'm imagining, kind of in the style of this particular book. I like that. I don't like this. And you just have to really be able to be clear so that, and I would have that project, if you're writing something, I would have the project at least 90% done before you start seeking that out. That would be my suggestion. And there's a lot of proofreaders in the world. Don't overlook that. Yes. There's a lot of really good books that would be great books with a proofreader.
And I think somebody can be so used to saying I can write, so therefore I can do my own copy editing, and no, it needs another set of eyes for sure.
It does, because you know what you meant.
Right.
And I can read right over it, and then I'll send it to somebody and they're like, this isn't even a sentence. I'm like, yes, it is. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
I just sent out a press release with Mother Teresa spelled the incorrect way, and of course did not notice it until it was in print. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it yet. Now that people know my secret, they can go and look for it. But
well, if you don't do your best proofreading until after you hit send, then you're not sending many things out.
Exactly. So we've got, layout, illustrators, photographers, all of these different people that can help us. How do you actually get the darn thing published, Rachel? Do you just, in this day and age, do you just self-publish, or do you seek out publishers? How does that part work?
All of mine have been self-published, and I have a couple of folks, a couple of agents that I've spoken to about projects that I'm looking at. But once you start that conversation, then it kind of goes the way of what's marketable and what others are doing and whose work is yours comparable to. Well, I don't really know. And I have kind of I'm not mainstream, which is fine, but I'm not going to write a summer beach read. That's just not my, I don't read them. I don't write them. It's not my jam. So, and it's hard to sit across from an agent in New York City and be like, explain a cow bio to them. So I've self-published just because it makes more sense for me. I'm not ever going to be a New York Times bestseller, but that's okay. So I sell a lot of them on my own website. The majority of them, they're on Amazon, but I think most people buy through my website, or they'll, stop grandma at Safeway and have, give them, let her know that they want to order a book or whatever. So I'm lucky because I have that name recognition through my other work, but I think there's nothing wrong with self-publishing, but I would make sure that it's a product that you can really stand behind and feel like you did everything very thoroughly.
Rachel Gabel, everyone, thank you so much to her for taking the time to join us for this podcast. And not only for that, but for the way that she continues to show up for this industry with heart, humor, and just a whole lot of talent. It's conversations like this that just remind you how much richness there is in the ranching lifestyle. And yes, for those that are wondering, since I did preface this whole thing as an added enterprise, I did ask that all-important question. Is there income in writing and publishing books? Rachel told me with a smile that it's enough to pay for Christmas, but not quite enough to retire the rancher. So manage those expectations accordingly. If you want to follow Rachel and her work, you can read her in the Fence Post magazine, hear her on the Western Ag Network, and tune into her Pro Ag podcast, available on all major platforms. You can also visit her online at rachelgabel.com or follow her on Facebook at Rachel Writes. We have all of those links waiting for you in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, where we celebrate the land, the legacy, and the people who keep the West rooted in something real.
You've been listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a project of the Rancher Stewardship Alliance. If you like what you heard, head to ranchstewards.org for added content, or follow the Rancher Stewardship Alliance on Facebook and Instagram.